Hey there, it's Laura Dominic. Thanks for joining me on a Plan for Joy podcast. Each week we'll be talking about things that will help you break the cycle of depletion. You know, the one that has you going from doing all the things to feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, resentment, anger, to sucking it up and starting all over again. And instead, learn to break the cycle and contribute from a place of abundance. Are you ready? Good. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of my podcast, A Plan for Joy. I am so excited to finally be able to say that. This is something I've been wanting to do for years, and it's finally happening. See, I did a stint with YouTube because I thought, well, that's easier to handle. I can just do a video, pop it up there, be done with it, instead of trying to figure out all this audio tech and stuff like that. But after 12 episodes, I just decided podcasting is the way to go. So I hope you're excited to listen to what we have to talk about here. In getting ready for this first episode, I wrote a couple of outlines, and then I even recorded one of them and decided, didn't like it. So I decided what I wanted to do was to start with more of a kind of who I am kind of episode, getting to know me and where I came from. And that will help you to understand a lot more of what we're going to discuss over the episodes to come. And besides, who doesn't like a good 2-part get to know me story? With that in mind, why don't we get started? I grew up in the far northwest suburbs of Chicago. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother. The neighborhood we lived in had a big impact on who I am as an adult. And it took me a while to fully realize what kind of an impact that neighborhood had on me. It was interesting, to say the least. I told my kids about it one time, and they're like, wow, that would make a really good musical. We could call it like Hanover Park the Musical, because there was just so many, bizarre things that happened there. But it was a good neighborhood. It had a lot of young families, a lot of little kids. And the good thing to come out of it is when I was 4 years old, I met my best friend there, and we're still friends to this day. So that, can I say, was worth all of it. It wasn't until really yesterday that I realized the connection between this next part of the story and how I viewed my self-worth. I've always thought that my self-worth was tied, or my worth was tied to people liking me. I had a real big problem if they didn't like me. It just made me very unsettled, and I would like hyper focus on that relationship to try and bring peace to it so that we could be in a good place again. And now when I was sitting down to put this together, it dawned on me what the connection was. There were 2 main families on our part of the block, one on each side of the street. The one on my side of the street, same side I lived on, a couple doors down, they had 10 kids. And the family across the street from me had 5 kids. And those 2 families did not like each other. So for whatever reason, they kind of not ran the block, but had a lot of influence. And so there was 2 pawns in the game here, myself and another little girl my age named Judy. And each summer we never were on the same side of the block. I don't know why this happened or how it even happened, but every summer I would be on one side of the block playing with one family. She would be on the other side of the block playing with the other family. And those 2 paths did not cross. But by the end of the school year, by the beginning of the next summer, something would always happen. Some fight would happen. I don't even know. Every year it was probably different. We would switch sides. And it wasn't even a conscious effort or choice on my part that I can remember. It was like all of a sudden I would just find myself playing on the opposite side of the street, and she would be on the opposite side of the street, and we would spend that summer, with our respective friend families, and And then the next summer it would change again. So no wonder, like it just dawned on me, no wonder I have such an issue with people liking me. And so I'm just like really grateful when you can make those kind of mental connections. Like the light dawns, the Holy Spirit is like, here's what you've been missing all this time. And so, there were periphery families in the neighborhood and they would kind of come and go. But it wasn't a very unified neighborhood. However, once or twice a year, the neighborhood would come together because for whatever reason, the neighborhood would flood every summer. And that meant the way the houses were constructed, a lot of the houses would flood too. And so the neighborhood would come together and we'd bail out each other's basements and everybody, would canoe up and down the street. It'd be a big party. And then I remember another time that the neighborhood came together when the guy on the next block decided he was going to murder his wife. That was quite the event that everybody kind of banded together for. Another pivotal event I remember from that neighborhood is my parents, who didn't really entertain too often, decided they were going to go big and throw a New Year's Eve party for the block. And so they planned everything out. They spent a lot of time getting this organized. And then one of the people that were invited, their sister was going through a mental health crisis that day. And so literally the whole party was a real downer because everybody was focused on trying to help this friend and her sister. And that, believe it or not, as an 8 or 9 year old little girl, that really had an impact on how anxious I got whenever I would host a party. Now my husband and I, we love hosting things, but that always has sat in the back of my mind that what if I throw this party and no one has any fun or no one shows up? So it's interesting how you can connect seemingly minor events from your childhood that you carry through your whole life. When I was in 7th grade, we moved out of that crazy neighborhood. And believe it or not, I was really upset. I mean, 12, 13 is not a great time of your life to be making changes like that. So I went off to a new junior high. I was very shy, didn't make many friends. Went into high school, same thing. First 2 years, very shy. Didn't make a whole lot of friends. And then something happened to me junior year, and I thought, well, what the heck, I'll try out for the pom-pom squad. Talk about going from 0 to 60. I made it, and I just kind of came out of my shell. I found friends, and I dove kind of headfirst into the culture of high school, which isn't always a good thing. Now, as far as faith life goes, I was raised Catholic, but very nominally Catholic. We went to church most of the time on Sunday, but I really had no knowledge of my faith. So when I went off to college, I was completely ready to live the college life, and that really didn't include any faith background or anything. And honestly, I would have stopped going to church in college, except that like the third day of my freshman year, I met my future husband, and we didn't really start dating right away, but I noticed that, he would go to church. So I would go to church too, because, during the Our Father at that time, everybody was starting to hold hands. And so I thought, if I go to church, I get to hold his hand because he didn't really know that I liked him. So we finally started dating. We immersed ourselves in college life for the good and the bad. Let's just put it that way. We graduated, both got jobs, and got married a year out of college. It seems like it was such an easier time back then. It was pretty much laid out. You went to school, you usually met someone, you got married pretty close after graduation, and it was almost guaranteed that you were going to get a job. So we started our life together. And this is the point in my life and in our lives when everything started to change. There was a lesson I started to learn at that point that you never say never, especially when God gets involved. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the next episode. But the reason I'm going through all of this is because we have to look back into our past to see how we were formed. And you can do this through therapy if you need to, if you had a traumatic upbringing or trauma in your life. I've done some therapy, but a lot of the introspection that I've gained from this time in my life came through the coaching that I had about a year or so ago, and I'll go into that later on. But it's so important to realize where we've come from and the people that were in our lives and how they impacted us and why we carry all of this going forward. And if we don't heal ourselves of it or change our mindset around it, it really can have a negative impact on our life. And so this is kind of my background, nominally religious or very little religion at all, very secular, very, very much of the culture, and then carrying that into my marriage. And so but God never leaves us hanging, even though I had no relationship with him at all. I find it very interesting that how he worked his way into my life. And again, that's part of my conversion story, which I'll talk about in the next episode. So really what I want to just say is thank you for listening. I'm so excited to be here. I hope that you will be a part of this podcast. I'm looking forward to doing some interviews and just talking about so many important topics, because what I found was happening to me was just this going round and round of being overwhelmed and depletion and not being able to give from a good place. And so I know what I've gone through, and I know how difficult it's been at times. And so what I do with my newsletter, you can sign up for that at aplanforjoy.com, and now through this podcast, and I have a book coming out soon called When Good Isn't Good Enough, helping Christian women break the cycle of depletion and live a life of wholeness. What I'm trying to do with all that is just help other women to have awareness for what is working in their lives and what's not working in their lives, help them change their mindset, because our brain is so incredibly powerful that if we could harness all of that power for good, it would be amazing the changes we would see in our culture. And then also the very spiritual aspect of everything, how important your relationship is with God and how much you need to have that connection with him, and you need to build a good prayer life. And so there's so many things that I'm looking forward to talking about, and I hope that you will join me each week. And again, like I said, let me know what you want to hear, because that's why I'm here. So until next week, have a great time, and God bless.